soup with a vegetable in it, and you take the vegetable out, the soup stays hadama, correct?
I have American citizenship. I could plead the fifth at any point that I want. On that question, I will temporarily plead the fifth, Rabbi Snyder.
Because we said last week, I think, that if the vegetable's in there and you zhuzh it, it kicks the soup back down to a shahako. But if you take it out, it stays in a hadama.
Rabbi Snyder, have I ever let you down?
No, sir.
Bez Hashem, within the next between 15 to 26 minutes, Yud Kei Vav Kei, if you don't have the answer to that question, so then your money back.
Deal.
Okay, so we're setting up an account to get the money back. I have a hunch that account will contain zero after an hour and 5 minutes. But the only thing we're doing is we are asking you of the ability to ask a couple of questions, because after spending 10 days in this, we are Baruch Hashem totally confused. Okay, there we go. Later, Rav. We have some new members here also, Baruch Hashem, that have joined us in the last week or so. Yes.
Okay, let's now, Rabbi say, after 10 days of this, we're in the soup, Rabbi say. We are in the soup.
Can I ask the Rav to get it's slightly muffled here, I think. Was that our mic or is it it's our mic? Is the Zoom island hearing the Rav very clearly? Snyder, open your mic.
We're hearing beautifully.
Very, very good, very good.
I hear fine.
Very good.
Okay, so it's our mic then. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So Bez Hashem, I'm going to try Bez Hashem to try to clarify the halachas of soups. I'm also going to, Bez Hashem, try to go a little bit also into Siman Reish Hey Sif Aleph. And let's go slow. Bamelech, try to get everything in, Bez Hashem, what to do practically. Now, knockouts, we saw last week, at least the Be'erech, I had about 15 different tnoyim. You read Shulchan Aruch over here, and the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Beis says, very simply, and it looks like a very simple sugya. Alamayim shebishlu bahem HaRav, water that you cook vegetables inside. You make mevarich abracha atzma shemevarich al HaRav atzman. You make the same bracha as the vegetable. Ava bijeim bem elatama yerek hagam. It only has the tam. It doesn't have the actual vegetable. Sounds very simple. Vegetable soup is a bari pri adama, and called to dine with the broth is a bari pri adama, and that's it. The hanimili b'shabishla b'lei basa, but regularly you put meat into the parsha. It's a different story. Bishlam in basar, you make on it a shahakal. Bishlam with basar, then already the bracha changes. Kanira, the meat is an ikr, and that is more important than the vegetables. And you make the bracha on the ikr and point to the tefel, and that's the bracha. Chicken soup, you would make a bracha of a shahakal on the broth. Very simple. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't like soup, all the various tnoyim. It sounds like very simply, if you ask the question, when you have vegetable soup, what bracha do you make? In the straight Shulchan Aruch, it seems to be no tnoyim. The only thing you need to know is, did you cook the vegetables in the soup? In the liquid. And the Shulchan Aruch would tell you, you cook the vegetables in the liquid, you make it on a bari pri adama. No mention of the Rosh, no mention of the Rashba. The obvious implication over here, as we started with in the last few weeks, is that over here, it seems to be everybody agrees to this. This is Bain, the Rosh will agree to this. Obviously, the Rosh will agree to this. This is Kipshuta the Rosh. When you mevashal a liquid, when you vashal a vegetable or fruit, anytime you mevashal, that gets the ikr tam. And the ikr tam is what's kaveya, the bracha. According to the Rosh, very simple. According to the Rashba, how are you going to learn? Why is this not a stira to what we learned in Siman Reish Beis? In Siman Reish Beis, we saw that the Rosh, the Rashba, Machlekes, so over here explains the Rashba himself, and that's of course in the Beis Yosef, that over here even the Rashba is going to agree, because over here it's the derech. The derech is to cook the vegetables. The derech is to cook the vegetables and to get the broth. And Mamela, so far, that's two t'nayim that we need, and the Shulchan Aruch is clear that much we all agree. Liquid that you cook, a vegetable that you cook, the bracha is like that of the vegetable. Now, if you would have stopped there, anytime you have a broth, you'd make on it a bari pri adama. But I'm going to now, not make a sikum of everything we spoke last week. I'm going to make a sikum la'alocha. What comes out now la'alocha? T'nai number one, in order to make a bracha of a superior bracha, adama, on the broth. I'm talking right now about the broth. Very important to keep that in mind. Anytime we're talking about that when you're having the soup, you're having the vegetables with the soup, with the broth, or a kompot, or a fruit type of soup, a fruit type of matziv. That's pashit. The Mishnah Berurah reminds us this. The Paiskim say this, that avada, if you have the fruit, then the liquid is tafel to the fruit. If you have the vegetables in the soup, that's avada that the soup is a hemshich of it. It's a tafel to the vegetables. That is not what we're talking about today. Soon we'll talk about maybe if there's mezainis inside or whatnot. But that's simple. If you have a vegetable soup and the vegetables are in there, there's no question. You make on it a bari priyadama and life is easy. The question is what if you're having just the broth? So I need t'nai number one, the rush. It has to be cooked or kavish or something, some type of a cooking process on the liquid. T'nai number one, squeezing is not enough for us to make the bracha of the superior bracha. T'nai number two is the rashba. It has to be, it's derech, it has to be, it's a normal thing. New so far, it's normal to cook the vegetables. T'nai number two. T'nai number three, if you have just a Shulchan Aruch, you might not necessarily know this, but you have to look a little further in the base areas. In other words, from this point, I'm only going to say T'nayim that we are makbid gomer on the halacha. T'nai number three, the base areas brings down what we call the Chuvas HaRosh. It has to be that I'm taking not just the liquid, I also want the solid. Not that I'm eating the solid right now. Not that I'm eating the vegetable right now, but that when I make this soup, we'll call it a soup, this broth, I'm not just doing it for the liquid. That's called beer in English. When I'm doing it just for the liquid, so then that is not the din of shlokis. We explained last week the lumdis of that, but that's T'nai number three. T'nai number three has to be that it's cooked, it's got to be the derech, and I want the vegetable, not that I'm getting rid of the vegetable. That explains to us beer. That's why beer is going to be not a mezainis, it's going to be a shackle. T'nai number three, these things, ironclad, this is brought in the Mishnah Berurah, brought in the Paiskim. Without this, it's a non-starter. You for sure are not going to make the bracha on the broth. And for example, there could be, and I know a borscht is ins are favorites over here. It could be that you have to go, that's Hashem, I'll tell you my findings in a moment, but just as case study, if you have a borscht, that they are selling you the borscht just as the juice, and it seems to be that 40 years ago in England, in the Sefer Makor Bracha, it was written by Rav Gabriel Kraus, L'zayin Gesund, who has grandchildren in my kollel. He writes over there on page 84 that in his book, he's going to write that the bracha on the borscht is going to be a shahakal. He says, why is it a shahakal? He says, well, they sell it just for the liquid and the salad, the beets or whatever, the vegetable, they get rid of. And they don't, people don't have any myelin benefit in the vegetable. He says, he says both ways, but without names and faces. If I would find out that borscht is used just for the liquid, so then that's beer. And then on that, you would make a shahakal. If you would have a borscht, which is made a specific type of a line of beets or whatnot, and they use this one only to make the liquid, so then it would be a shahakal. T'nai number three. T'nai number four is the exact opposite.
But dual use is an adama? Dual use of borscht is an adama?
I'm sorry?
Dual use. If you do use the beets.
Dual use is bevada in adama, devaila. We have it's cooked, it's derech, and I'm using it for also the solid and also the liquid. T'nai number four is, again, I'm not going into the Rishaynish names and faces, but this is brought in the Chayei Adam, and the Mishnah Berurah brings this Chayei Adam. We called it a Rambam, we had other names for this, but T'nai number four is pickle juice. What's the T'nai of pickle juice? The T'nai of pickle juice is that if you are doing it only for the solid, the exact opposite. If you're doing it only for the solid, then that's also the liquid is not going to get the bracha of the vegetable. Good example of that is pickle juice. Now, it's very interesting. I had a Russian fellow very interesting, who came to fix my sink. This is fresh off the press. A Russian fellow came to fix my sink. It was falling out. And I had it there, a can of pickles. This Rabbi Isai is a Maisa Shahaya. I had there a can of pickles. I took the pickles. There was like one pickle left. And I was about to take the can and pour it down the drain. Vladimir stopped me in my tracks and he said to me, he speaks Hebrew, he said to me, "Ata lo shoteh et zeh?" I said to him, "Lo." Net. He said to me, "Ata yodea shebakayitz, in the summertime, it's the best thing to have pickle juice." I go, "Tagid li." And I'm going to make you famous. Tell me, in Ruslan, in Russia, where you come from, is that a delicacy? He tells me over there they sell pickle juice for the juice alone. Here's Amaisa.
It's a fairish mishabura.
Oh, but now we know, right? Rabbi Isai, this could end the war in Ukraine if we can spread this information. You understand, Rabbi Isai, the magnitude of this? The magnitude of this is that there actually are places in the world that when they're making the juice, they're making it also for the juice. So my t'nai of pickle juice is unfair. I'm going to be considered a bigot. I'm singling out and saying that pickle juice is an example of a juice which is never made for the purpose of drinking. It's only made for the purpose of the pickles. And you should know that is a racially incorrect statement. There are places in the world that they drink pickle juice. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, as I look around the Zoom, the Tyra Jungelite of Inzer, Keidel, and Das, I think I feel safe to say do not drink pickle juice yet. It's a Shem, you'll get there one day. But in the meantime, that'll be T'nai number 4. T'nai number 1 is you cook it. T'nai number 2, or koivish it. T'nai number 2, derech. T'nai number 3, it's you got to have the vegetable. It can't be you're getting rid of the vegetable. You don't have to be eating the vegetable right now, but it can't be you did it just for the juice. And T'nai number 4 is you can't be doing it just for the vegetable. Both of them have to be true. You have to be doing it for both the vegetable and both the juice. If you're doing it for either or, no good. If you do it just for the vegetable, pickle juice. If you're doing it just for the juice, so that's borscht. It's not halacha l'maisa borscht, but that if there would be such a situation, then on that liquid you would make a shahakol. T'nai number 5 is not pashit. I'm going to mention it because Rabbeinu HaGadol, the greatest yid that walked the face of American soil in the last 50 years, Igros Moshe, in Yeredeya, in Chelik Beis, Seif Simon Chafei. This is not pashit, what I'm about to say now. It's totally in a big sugi of a nigroin. There's a big shaila. There could be a 5th t'nai. It's a bit complicated to go into that 5th t'nai. The t'nai is, and we mentioned it last week from the Mordechai, that if you have something that you drink as a drink, you don't use it as a soup, you don't use it as a part of a meal, you drink it as a drink. Something that is a shame of a drink maybe never can get the shame of an adama, of an eitz. It's always considered losing that chashivas, and it has a din of a shahakol. The Mishabura does bring this idea in Simon Reish Beis Yivkat and Lamed Daled. It's quite complicated. Is the Mishabura paskening like it? He says others argue on it. The Goyin does bring it, but Vinishvi, Rabbeinu HaGadol Igros Moshe, after proving that potentially you would be able to make a Bari Priya eitz, Adama, prune juice, etc., whatever he's talking about there, he says, Aval ha'olam noyig levarach shahakol, because it's oif and shtia, and he brings Kimoy the Gra in Reish Beis Siv Daled. Ramesha Feinstein by me is enough of a makor to make a 5th t'nai. Ramesha just made a 5th t'nai, that in order to be able to make an adama, an eitz, it's got to be 1 cooked, 2 derech, I know normal, whatever it's called derech agav, doesn't necessarily mean that Roiv people are doing it. It means Roiv people would be masking to consider that a proper thing that you cooked for. It might not be that the Roiv of the min is used for that purpose. Don't get confused. It means that Roiv B'nai Adam agree that this is a proper usage of the product. T'nai number 3, I keep the vegetable. T'nai number 4, I do it for the drink. It's not that I get rid of the juice. And t'nai number 5, Rabbeinu HaGadol Ramoshe tells us that that's also the minig ha'olam, that it can't be a juice. It can't be something you drink as a drink. Now, don't get confused. Let's say we'll find a broth in a moment, in Mitzvah Shem, that you make on it in Adama, and I decide to put it in a cup and drink it. that doesn't turn that into a drink. I think even Ramosha's minig oilam just means if the derech oilam, is this considered a soup or is it considered a drink? So if you have something like let's say, I wonder the way that this Russian fellow was describing to me pickle juice, it sounded like they drink it as a drink. No, if they drink it as a drink, then it also would not be an adama. It would taka be a shackle, which you see, that's why the Mishnah Berurah himself seems to not go with this snai, because he seemed to say it would taka be an adama. Okay, but the Ramesh is big enough that we can add a snai.
Rabbi Kallus, in the previous year we've had, they used that gra as a reason possibly for making a shackle on coffee and tea. For that reason of the gra, that would be an example of something that was.
The emphasis, we don't need to go that far because once
he
we have the
mentioned that
snai,
as one of the reasons for a shackle on coffee and tea could be based upon this gra.
It certainly is true. It certainly is true, but it's much easier. We have a much simpler reason. The reason that the Maisa, we get rid of the tea bag. So that is something which is more muskim in the paiskim. I'm being asked, what's the difference between number 3 and number 5? Number 3 is that I'm doing it and I don't want the vegetable b'chlal, but I still eat it as a soup, as a broth, something you dip your bread into. It's meal-like. Mashenkein, number 5, is it's a drink. It's a shtia. It's something that people are mesiachis to as a shtia. It's very different snai. Has a tremendous nafkaminas it could have. But don't think that if I take soup and I put it in a cup, that's how I like to sip my soup while I have my meal. There's a difference between that. That everyone will agree is still being considered a soup. Now the clear can still be considered a soup. These are the 5 Tanaim Rabbi side that we paskin like. Now, let's go one step further. Okay, and the truth is, if we would stop here, we would already know a velt. You would ask me, no. So what's the bracha on vegetable broth? I put inside carrots. I put inside sometimes potatoes. I put inside, we'll see different things in a moment, but certainly carrots, potatoes, pumpkin, whatnot. It's normal. It's cooked. I want both of them. I want the juice. I'm not drinking it as a drink. It's simple. That should be the halacha. That should be the maisa. And certainly one that wants to do that is permitted to do it. I did see in the Sefer Zayis HaBracha, he's chayshish for the shita of the ra'ah. He says you have to eat it together with the vegetable. He's also chayshish that our vegetables are weak vegetables and don't give a taste. Both of these are, number one, shver in halacha, shver in minig, shver in mitzias, and therefore, the halacha, what I said is the psak halacha, that avada, if you have a vegetable broth, even without the vegetables, and you want to make on it an adama, avada, you're doing the right thing. You don't have to be chayshish that the potato soup, I don't know, the potato soup that I have tastes like a potato. And it's something that's normal to do. Even if you don't have the potato, the Mishnah Berurah is certainly not chayshish for the ra'ah that we mentioned. And therefore, clearly, and it's not drunk as a drink. And therefore, if you want to make on a potato soup a brei pri adama, he's beseda gomer. I don't see any problem with that. That's also the chayra. I would imagine. That takes care of potato soup.
That's of course, even if there's no potato in the soup. If there's a potato in the soup,
potato in the soup, because once there's a potato in the soup, if there's a potato in the soup, and then it's for sure in a double. So we're saying even when there's no potato in the soup, that's a black halacha.
Is there an Indian to take the potato out of the soup and make an adama and a potato first, somehow to take yourself from the day suffix? And this way, your
person wants to be chayshish for the shita of the ra'ah, kadosh yomer.
Well, that was our discussion for the last hour, Rabbi Kallus, regarding borscht. If you're making it specifically to cook the beets as well as to drink the borscht, and even if you remove the borscht, you could still make a dama on.
So let's go slowly. Legabe borscht, my understanding, I mean, the truth is, I spoke to Eretz Yisrael dika borscht machers. I don't know, and these things are totally in the Zman and in the Makim. A little bit, I'm going a bit global over here. But I did talk to the borscht machers and the borscht eaters, right? And it would seem to me that the people that eat the borscht, some of them do eat the beets, and some of them certainly they like the liquid and they want the soup. In my humble opinion, Klaimar Klafi that Metzias, so then on borscht you can make an adama. If the oilam will tell me that Metzias is different, I don't know. When they drink borscht, they drink it as a drink, The people that like to taste the borscht, they're the ones they sell in the jars. They drink it as a drink.
I mean, generally, as I said earlier today, I'm here, it's called the borscht belt because it was served in these hotels in plates as a course between the farsh and the main course. They served borscht on a plate and they ate it with a spoon.
Or in a bowl, yeah.
Correct. I don't think it's so common to drink it as a drink. If they would drink it as a drink, then we have to worry about the sheet of the goyim, the Ramosha, that chumrah of the minig, that is a shtia. But it's hard for me to swallow that it's a drink, but it's totally in that mitzias. And okay. Now, what's very important, this is a little bit of a chiddush. Last week, I spoke about this at the end, and I have to maybe just emphasize something extremely important. Today in HBrachos, in the HaRav world, in the Shlakitz world, this is one of the most important nekudas. There is a Tila LeDavid in Simon Reish Beis and Sivkat and Zion. And he says, a gewaltige chiddush, I guess you could say it's like a riesige chiddush, but it's a geschmacke chiddush. He says, look, that you understand that when I have beer and I'm not eating the barley and I'm throwing out the barley, so then what's the bracha? Then it's a shackle. Because it can't be, I'm doing it, you have to be coming out of the food, but you can't be better than, if the food's not here, so then you can't say that I'm going to be better than the original product. That's kanira the logic. Okay. So, lo yafe koyach ha-ben mi koyach ha-av. If the av is nicht du, as the ben ken is ein besser wie the tate. Okay. Something like that. Kommt the Tila LeDavid with a very nice sushtel to this. He said, I'm going to give the example of like a split pea soup to bring out my point. And we'll get to zhuzhers in a moment. Last week I spoke about this, and I think it's important that we bring it there very lemaisa. He says something like a split pea soup. And again, I'm going in a case study. So each person, they have to decide how they make a split pea soup. But I'm talking in a case study. If you make a split pea soup, and the way you make split pea soup is that you just cook it until it's gone. In other words, until it just is basically disintegrated. So now what's the bracha on the split pea soup? What's the shaila? The shaila is, look, it's a vegetable that you cook. So do I make on this product the bari priadama? Kumta Tila LeDavid, very nice idea. He says, look, that you understand that when we get rid of the product, we get rid of the vegetable, we got rid of the av, so then the bracha of the ben can't be better than the av. Okay? So then you understand there's another way to get rid of the av, is by totally disintegrating him. In that case, the split pea itself has disintegrated, and that gets the din of nisrasik, which in Mitzvah Shem, I think that's the next thing you're going to learn. So there, the bracha on the split pea at that point is shackle. It's disintegrated in, and it's no longer the form of the fruit. So it's a shackle. So he says, how could the broth be better than that? It's as if we got rid of it. Kimoy, that you understand that when we get rid of the barley, so then the thing that comes out of the barley, the juice that comes out of the barley is not better than the barley. So too, if you did something to make it that the barley, kivyachol, in our case, the split pea, is a shackle, lost its chashivas. So therefore, the juice that comes out of it also can't have a chashivas. Does it the chiddush of the Tila LeDavid? I see that most of the Kitzur Svarim, they bring this idea of the Tila LeDavid, and it seems to be muskim in the paiskim, this idea. Now I want to take this idea of the Tila LeDavid and go to the next level. It is a sefer that it's my understanding is, the same bracha. My understanding is that Reb Shlomo Zalman, in the end of this sefer, it's an English book written by Rabbi Badner. My understanding is Reb Shlomo Zalman actually looked over these tshuvas, so they're completely seem to be reliable. And he seems to, over there, discuss the next level case. And I saw that the Shevet HaLevi, in the Beis HaLevi, Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner had a koibitz where they say a lot of his psakim. In the 15th volume, in the 55th page, over there, they discuss the shaila I'm about to discuss. It's the next level of the shaila. They discuss a shaila, which is very common today, that I have a soup, I made the soup, let's say zucchini, very normal thing. It's the derech to cook the zucchini. It's cooked. You want both the zucchini and the liquid. It's not drunk as a drink. It's all the reasons why on the broth of a zucchini, you would make an adama. All the reasons. So far, we make an adama. It has the taste and whatever, everything good. Now, a very common thing is people take that zucchini and then they zhuzh it up and they basically blender it legamre into the liquid. So now, how do I look at this? Do I say it already got the shame of that the broth was a dama? So if it already got the shame that the broth was a dama, maybe it's not like the Tila David. The Tila David was talking that it just cooked until there was nothing left of it. And therefore, the first time that we have in front of us a broth, I don't have in front of me the vegetable. So therefore, the bracha is a shakal. But what about if I have something that it was chal? I'm explaining the lumdus of why it would be different. What would it be if I have something that it was chal already, the bari priyadama, because I took a zucchini, I made a soup, and if somebody would have taken the soup and drank it right then, he would have made an adama. Now I go and I zhuzh it. Do I say, well, now you're not going to say that the broth is better than the zucchini, and the zucchini is a shahakal, and therefore the broth is shahakal? Or do I say, no, the broth is the broth already got on at the shame of the shahakal, and therefore, adama, excuse me, and therefore, what do I care what happened now to the vegetable? Now, in essence, if you think about it, it's not so mistaber. It's more mistaber to say it's the same thing as the Tila David, because even in Tila David's case, it takes time. And if I would have the split peas at that point, the soup at that point, it would also be an adama. And then you let it keep on going, and then it turns into a shahakal. So I would think that it's the same thing. I'm obviously, I'm not even offer vafer. My Zayda was offer vafer, but I'm not even. And Kumter Rav Shlomo Zalman in the Sefer of the same bracha, and he talks about a case, which I think this is the case. He's talking about al-marak agvanias. He's talking about tomato soup, or he talks about marak broccoli or marak afuna, that he says that you marasik it. Mimenu a marak samich, and it doesn't have shtiklach, because if it had shtiklach, then avada the bracha is adama, if you have the shtiklach. But he's saying you totally blenderized it. He says you make a shahakal. Why? Shein mevarchem b'repi adama lamayim. You don't make a bracha on the liquid. Elo kishayahabishol etzayrach achilas HaRav. He says mamish titzvara. He says if you were doing it to get a vegetable, he says we look at your original intention. It might change for Boisai if you decided to zhuzh it afterward. Originally you made a soup, it was a dama, and then you changed your mind, you want to zhuzh it, then we could talk. But he seems to say when it was originally done for the vegetable, then the juice is adama. But if you didn't do it for the vegetable over here, you clearly didn't do it for the vegetable, because the vegetable is going to be gone. It's going to be misrasik. It's not going to have the shame of the vegetable. It's going to be a shahakal mitzad the vegetable. So therefore the broth is also going to be a shahakal. Azay Dr. Shlomo Zalman. That's how it says it inside the Sefer of the same bracha. Myself, Rabbi Yisai, I don't fully understand what's the nidain. By me, l'chayra, I think it's Pashat, it's shahakal. Not for that reason. I think it's Tamasai Pashat shahakal, because when I blender zhuzh up this zucchini and all this business, it all gets mixed together. So the ikr is the zhuzhed pri, and the liquid is tuffle to that, because it's reingemished inside the thickness of the pri. So anyways, typically it's ikr v'tuffle. So then it's anyways tuffle to the pri, and therefore, no matter what, it should be a shahakal. So whether you say like
maybe the cheftzes the Rav said earlier overrides ikr and tuffle, because once it becomes a cheftz of a dama, then
nothing overrides ikr v'tuffle. We know that ikr v'tuffle can even be metapel a piece of bread. Nothing ever is overrides ikr v'tuffle. You make the bracha on the ikr and point to the tuffle, no matter what it is. You can have a piece of fish pattering a piece of bread. We never say that.
But Rabbi Kallus, if you would have a wife who would make the zucchini soup, and she makes it, and then she decides, okay, I love the soup as it is, I'm going to freeze it. Then after she puts it aside, puts it in the freezer, she says, well, look at all the zucchini I got left over. I'm going to purify it now and make it into, purified zucchini. That shouldn't, according to the Rav's Sfor, that shouldn't affect the original intention of making a pea soup out of this, and initially separate. Now she just has left.
In other words, if you kept the broth separately, then after
exactly.
If you kept the broth separately,
you put it in the freezer or you put it in the refrigerator.
Yeah. If you kept the broth separately, then you would need to come on to Shlomo Zalman's chiddush, and now you see what a riesige chiddush for Shlomo Zalman is. Meaning, I took the vegetable and I turned it into shahakal. And therefore, the broth now changes its bracha. That to me is an incredible chiddush that you don't really necessarily see in the Tila David. In the Tila David, all you saw is that it was a constant until we got there. But here that it changes is very difficult. There was a tkufa where it was a zucchini soup and the bracha was a dama. Now I go and do something tomorrow to the zucchini, I zhuzh it up, I make it into baby food, and now it changes the bracha on the liquid. This is a quite a big
that
chiddush.
seems to be very difficult to.
Yeah, that I find to be very big chiddush. I'm not sure 100% if Rosh Hashanah is saying that. In other words, maybe Rosh Hashanah is talking about only the case of where you did it milachatchila al das kain. You look in the Shevet Levi, he seems to say the second case. The Shevet Levi is talking about a case, I think, of what you're talking about. Marak HaRav she'irvavu b'blender v'nisrasik legamri v'nasa noizel k'mashka shalach ha'bishal irvavu kevin shekvar nikva din ha'noizel b'marak that it's bari piyadama lo yoivad es birkasei k'shemisrasik kevin shekvar nikva birchas bari piyadama al amayim. So it remains an adama. I can't tell you 100%. I know what he's saying. I think he means that he's talking about this case, that you took the vegetables and you want to make them into baby food. Now, they're not going to go and say that the liquid is going to lose the shame. It already had the shame. This, I must admit, is not so clear. In my case, the psak, I think, is clear.
But then you have the liquid itself is a dama. You then add mamash yerek to it, and that knocks it down to a shako because the yerek's been zhuzhed. That's a strange
Which case?
result.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
You got vegetable broth. It's a dama, and then you take zhuzhed peas or zhuzhed zucchini, add mamish HaRav into that, but then
you want to add it now into it.
Shako.
You want to add the vegetables into zhuzhed vegetables.
Yeah, that's a strange result. You have vegetable soup, add vegetables to it. And
then see what I'm saying? It'll be a v'tafel for sure. If it'll be all mixed in together, so then for sure. Yeah, then for sure. Then it'll be a shako. 100%. That's pashit. I don't have any tzad not like that. It's the regular dinim of ikar v'tafel. That's mamish pashit. Okay. Now, that's what everybody say. In a nutshell, the simple soups. I guess that's the simple soups. Before I continue, are there any shayla on the simple soups? That's simple. I hope the psak halacha should be very clear. I'll make a quick sikum on this, and then I'll ask any questions. You need 5 t'nayim. If you have those 5 t'nayim, you make it on a bari piyadama. Derech, bishul, done for the liquid, done for the solid, and that it's not done as a drink. It's very simple. Nafkamina, potato soup, even if you're drinking the broth, bari piyadama. If you're drinking with the vegetables, no shayla that it's going to be a bari piyadama. But this will be a nafkamina. It'll be, let's say, let's take onion soup. Let's see this onion soup. Derech, it's bishul, it's done for the liquid, it's done for the solid. All the above. It's not done as a drink. If you're having just the broth of the onion soup, why not? It should be a bari piyadama. I don't see why it shouldn't be a bari piyadama. It's a very normal thing. It's very normal.
What's the bracha on boiled onions? Not if you don't fry.
That we're going to get to Shem. We're going to have to get to. That's the first part of the sugya.
That will affect the soup.
No, I don't. First of all, I don't think it's true.
I only boil them in the soup. I don't fry.
No. But again, over here, it's definitely the derech to be using them. It's definitely the derech to be mavashal them. That's no question. Okay. And it's also the derech. I think. I mean, you'll all correct me if I'm wrong, but all the raid of Sif Aleph, which is discussing if on onions you make a shahakal, a dama, raw, cooked, etc. That's only if you wouldn't eat it by itself. But the onions of an onion soup, of course, he eats by himself. But that's the whole vart. He likes eating the onions. So therefore, however you cut it in Metzias, for sure, an onion soup, the soup itself is going to be an adama, the broth. Now, I must admit, after even hearing this whole sugya, I try to pater because, there's shitas ra'az and there's chumras and there's this and that. I'm saying, but if somebody asks me, here I am, I have the broth of an onion soup. What's the halacha? The halacha is adama. Carrot soup. So this, I don't know what to tell you. Carrot soup. What's the metzias of a carrot soup?
It gets zhuzhed.
What?
It gets zhuzhed.
Yeah, so if it gets zhuzhed, then for sure. But let's say it doesn't get zhuzhed.
Why is carrot soup different than anything else?
So I don't know, but in the same bracha, he brings down, Shlomo Zalman seems to say it's a shahakal. Let me see the lashon, one moment. Why is that in a moment?
Because it could be carrots are eaten both raw and cooked.
But there's for carrot, that's just a reason it should be an Adama.
Oh,
But he says
right.
it's Shahakal. What's his cheshbon? Give me one moment. I'm sorry. I just think that of this I have no Havanim, I must admit. I have no idea. Carrot soup is pasha to me. It should be Adama. If you taste the soup and whatever, I don't think anybody throws out the carrots. I don't think. I have no idea.
I don't think
Celery.
I don't think there's any way of getting a good carrot soup without, as he says, zhuzhing it up. Otherwise, you don't get a real carrot.
Okay, so if it's zhuzhing it up, then it's telling the zhuzhing shaila. And if it was done al das the zhuzhing, no. So that you can hear Shlomo and anyways, you have what I'm saying, that it's tuffle to the fajujed. But don't forget, if there's bits that you see, right? You know, I don't mean one bit or whatever. I mean a bunch of bits. So then anyways, it'll be Adama as it is. Celery soup, you should know that in Artzeinu HaKadosh is not such a common thing. I don't know what's going on in America. What's going on in America? Celery soup. Because if celery soup, why not? I mean, l'chara, I don't see the feed this rate. Why shouldn't celery soup be, why shouldn't it be Adama? Let's try and think.
Avada celery soup is served here at that of fancier caterers compete in giving you the weirdest vegetables and soups. So
is it common? Is it a common thing? It's a derech. It's a common thing.
You can order celery soup for your wedding.
Oh wow, this is already something to.
But how is it made? Isn't it made when you really zhuzh it up and then you reproduce?
No. They don't zhuzh up the celery soup.
No,
I don't think so.
Okay.
So then the chayra make an adama on the broth. Obviously, if there's celery there, for sure you make an adama. Same with tomatoes.
There's a machlokes the mitzias how you make celery soup.
Let me hear.
If it's totally pureed, then it's a shako.
Okay, totally pureed is shako for sure.
What if you throw out the celery? You don't eat the celery on celery soup. You usually throw it out.
That's the derech. Is that the derech?
Yeah, who eats boiled celery?
Then that's the beer svara. Then that's the beer svara. If they throw out the celery, then yeah, that's the beer svara, and you wouldn't make on it a dummy, you'd make on a shako. Is that the mitzias? I just don't know.
They don't serve, if you have it at a chasna, that's not serving it with celery in it. They throw it out, obviously, unless they put it.
Elephant, you're going to come to my chasna, you'll find out maybe fakir. Don't insult me. You don't know what's going to be. We'll find out. But I hear that. He's saying that the derech is, they throw out the celery, so then besides the beer svara.
I've never had celery soup here, so I don't know. It's not, I don't go to those kind of chasnas that they give me that choice. I can't tell you.
Well, we're all going to have to, we're
going to have to go to a fancy chasana. Yes, Hashem. Maybe next Yisrael in June.
Ain't going to be mine, fancy.
They're obviously making a wedding, Hashem.
Celery soup? We're all invited for the celery soup.
For the celery soup. Now, the Maisa, that's, I guess, what we call the simple soups. Now, the next level of this, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber brings down, what if you have a chicken soup? And that he seems to say, very simply, that if you have marok that has in it the buster and the rokis and everything, then it seems to be, it's pashit, that if you're having the broth, you make on the shahakal, and that we understand is because the ikr is the chicken. That's the ikr taste. Obviously, the vegetables are there just to give a chizik, give a epis taste to the chicken. Now, the Mishabrua over here in Sivkat in Yud Gimel, he says like this: he says, let's say I'm eating the yerek with the marok. He says, let's say I have a chicken soup. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. Let's say I have a yerek, regular chicken soup. You have chicken. Inside the chicken soup, there's onions, there's carrots, there's a lot of vegetables and whatever. So Mishabur and Sivkan Gimel says, he says, no problem. Make an adama on chicken soup. The marok not a tuffle gamla yerek. He says, because the liquid is always bundled.
265. 265 in the left side.
The yerek kufa bevadai loy not a tuffle la basar kevin shabala mazal l'sayva. How could you say the vegetables tuffle to the soup? Already it's coming for the purpose of filling you up. And for sure, the vegetable fills you up more than the soup.
So
Now,
the
this
Mishabura here goes
Rabbi
back and forth. He goes back and forth. Why?
Mishabura also brings down the prima gaudium in brackets. Right, the whole thing is a little bit interesting over here. Right? The chayra,
We couldn't
I don't know.
figure out shot near Gimel yesterday. Maybe the Rav
What's the
could explain.
Metzias, Rabbi Isai? I think the Metzias is that you ask anybody when he's making a chicken soup, the vegetables are not there as an ikr. Forget, we'll get to the Mishabura, but just talk about Batish a minute. Nobody's eating the vegetables as an ikr, and that's what's the ikr meal, and the soup is just enhancing that. It's just, it's the ikr nourishment that he's getting is vegetables. That's not what people do. Most people, their kavanah is that for carrot. The carrot is really, to make the soup more enjoyable, right? It's really to enhance the flavor of the soup. I think that's the metzias by most people. And this is why in the Sefer of the same bracha, he quotes for Shlomo Zalman in the 23rd perek, HaRav Lamed Beis, Ma shekasav Mishabura Reish Hey, Loy Mayri b'mikra kazeh, she'ikr kavanasu lechol hagezer kidei lelafes hamorak. He wants to say a Graldik Chiddush. He says the Mishabura is talking about some weird case that nobody has. Mishabura is talking about a case of where the guy wants the ikr, the vegetable, and the soup is bottled to that. But Mashenke in us, it's the exact opposite. By us, we drink the soup as the ikr, and we want to have like a little vegetable also to go along with it. So it sounds like in this case, you would make a shahakal. That's what Shlomo Zalman seems to say. Just a little bit navaich. I don't know. This to me is a little bit of a stuff. Nobody reading Mishnah Berurah is going to know this. And it bothers me a little bit because chicken soup is not a new thing. It's not a nayazach. It's not in microwave, Rabbi Isai. It's a given chicken soup you're in the haim. So Mistama, when they made the chicken, I don't know, they can help me out. When they made chicken soup in the haim, that was the pshat. The ikr was the vegetables, and the chicken was just the marek was tuffled to the vegetables.
Wasn't that way when I was growing up, but it seems to be that way now. Everybody has a lot of vegetables in their soup, at least in my house and in my kids.
But even though there's a lot of vegetables in the soup,
well, they eat it.
It's all there because it gives the chicken soup a bit of vegetables. They also put tons of chicken.
No, but in the Haim they couldn't afford to throw vegetables out. That was the point. So
for sure,
it was too expensive. And therefore,
yeah, but I'm talking not about the vegetables they threw out. I'm talking about the ones that even they keep in the chicken soup. The one they throw out for sure. I'm talking about the ones that they keep in the soup. Let's say I'm not talking about the one in the bag into this. You keep inside the onion and you keep this. So what's lemaisa in that case? If anybody learning the Mishnah Berurah, he's going to say, I make a bracha on the adama, on the carrots, on this, and I pater the juice. Right. So I must tell you, this is a case where someone has to pater because there's some Zalman saying something which is very mistaber, but it's definitely not the pashut lashon of the Mishnah Berurah. I don't believe the Mishnah Berurah's chicken soup was so much different. They threw in whatever pupik loch and das and gargaloch or some zigahat and dahaim, and they put in all types of vegetables also. And the Mishnah Berurah sounds like that you would make the bracha on the vegetable and pater the liquid. I don't know. I guess pashut that if you have chicken in the soup, and it's mamish like a chicken soup, and you also have a bissel carrot here and a bissel dust there, then for sure it's charcoal and it paters the adama. But sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes you have a chicken soup, there's lots of vegetables in it. So
well, let's make a pashut. You have a chicken soup with a carrot in it, which people do a lot. Forget about a lot of vegetables. So,
so anyone learning Mishnah Berurah would have said, make a bracha on the adama and pater the whole soup. As long as it's not mugzam. Obviously, it can't be that he has a carrot in 4 bites of the soup and then there's 20 spoonfuls of just liquid. Then anyways, it's not going to be considered a tafel. By no means. It would be considered a tafel. Mishnah Berurah, when he's talking about the vegetables, he means that there's enough vegetables going on the whole time. And anybody learning Mishnah Berurah would have assumed they make a bracha on the vegetable and pater the soup. If Shlomo Zalman is saying something, it's mistaber. I mean, I hear it, that when you make a bracha on the soup is the ikr because it's really coming the vegetables to enhance the soup. So how could you say that the vegetable is the ikr? And he seems to say you make a shakal. What I do, because I do not know what to do, is I will pater it. To go and take out the vegetable and take the soup, that's not pashut that you're allowed to do that. because it could be that it's one food. If it's one food, it gets one bracha. So I tried to pater, and I tried to make the bracha on something else. If anybody has a clarity on this, you should tell me, because this is something that I did not get clear.
Well,
How much of the chicken is in there? Maybe a little piece of chicken?
no, we're talking about vegetables.
The Sefer V'Zois HaBracha in page
It
119.
doesn't have to be in the soup.
I'll read you what the Zois HaBracha says in page 119. I think he's
How much
quoting
it
from
was
Rabbi
used
Yashiv.
to make it?
He says, "In ikar kavanasai b'yirakis, if the ikar purpose of the vegetables is not lulafes behemes hamarak, the vegetables is not coming to, service the juice. Ella, he wants to eat the vegetables. Then you can't say they're bottled to the mark. Then you can't say that they're bottled to the mark." And he says, "Yeshla freedom." So you should separate them. He allows you to do what I said that you probably shouldn't do. He says, if you're having vegetable soup tonight, chicken soup, excuse me, and you want the carrots and you're hungry, you want the carrots to eat them. So he says, well, you can't say that the carrots are bottled to the soup. And he seems to say you also can't say the soup is bottled to the carrots. And he allows you to do what I said you shouldn't do. He says you should take the vegetable out, make a bright adama, take the soup, make a shahakal. Like that, I think he has my problem that l'chayra it's very hard to kaveya and whatever. I would think in general it's going to be hard to figure out who's the ikar in this case. I would say in this case l'chayra you have to pater. I don't have any other suggestion on that one, and I guess we'll go weiter unless anybody has something to say.
So Lamaisa, if the Rav's passing that if you eat chicken soup with vegetables in it, unless you're eating an overwhelming amount of vegetables, you have a suffix, and therefore you should find something else to pater it. Is that what you're saying? Did I say it correctly?
What, you drink a glass of water, make a shakal?
No, only if you're thirsty. You can't make a bracha on water unless you're thirsty.
Okay. Or something for a shakal.
I'm sorry?
So you have a glass, take a mouthful of orange juice for a shakal.
Yeah, or borscht that's made for the purpose of drinking. You just walk around with a little bag of borscht, right? But only if it was made for the purpose of drinking. Otherwise, we get involved in the other issue. It's interesting. I don't know, anybody who has it's a fair one. I don't know what to do. Let's say somebody calls me up and he says, I can't pater, I don't have anything else. What do I do? And I ask him this question. There's tons of vegetables in there. And he says, yeah. I said, what do you want? He said, I want everything. I want the vegetables, I want soup. How could you tell him not to do like the Mishabura and just make an adama and pater the soup? That's what the Mishabura seems to say. Just like that. It's a fair shayla. Okay. Next. Now, there's a lot of rate over here that the Mishabura brings down about more difficult shaylas about mezainis. The truth is, we're somewhat unequipped to don these shaylas out of stock because we didn't learn properly the sugya of ikar v'tafel yet. I'll just mention halacha l'maisa on these shaylas, which we talked about. Let's say a marak that has itriot, like we say noodles or things like that. Kneidlach. Mishbur Sivkat Yudal says. He says, in other words, let's say I have a knedel, I have knedlach in my chicken soup, I have soup nuts in my chicken soup, not the mezainis ones, I'm not getting involved in hamaitzi and whatever. And then, basically in every spoonful, I have some mezainis. So then that's for sure the regular rules of ikar, v'tafel, you make a bracha on the mezainis, and you pater the whole entire soup. Even though you might have a little bit of juice at the end, that's the regular rule. Rabbi say, cereals and whatnot, that if you have a little bit of juice at the end, that's all. Sometimes you have one knedel and a ganze soup. If you have one knedel and a ganze soup, you can't make a bracha on the mezainis and pater the whole entire soup. Then it's going to require two separate brachos, because obviously you can't say that the liquid is going to be tafel here in this case. Right? If a person has, let's say, mushroom barley soup, so then the chari makes on it a mezainis. Right.
When you have the knedel in the soup, though, according to the Rav, you shouldn't just take the knedel out and make a mazonos. You should find some other mazonos to make it.
So if it's one knedel, then it doesn't bother me so much, because then it's clear, distinct that you're going to be having 20 spoons of liquid. Obviously, you can't say that's tafel to mezainis. My problem with the vegetable soup was that the vegetable soup was basically in every bite. You can have vegetables and liquid, vegetables and liquid. So that was my problem, why I didn't like separating it. But when you have one knedel or you have a few croutons or whatever, the truth is if you have one crouton, Rabbi said, just floating around in a soup, it's probably tuffle. It's probably just, it's just there, so you don't get rid of it. Now, if you have mushroom barley soup, the brachas is mezainis. Why not? So,
what if
make
you
a
cut up
mezainis and paiter as a tuffle? Sorry?
if you cut up the knedel in the soup, also would be the same thing. So you'd be
Yeah, but you'd have to cut it up. It has to be that you cut up enough knedel.
But most of the soup.
Correct. Now, there's a whole need over here in the Mishabura. It's called Yud Aleph. He talks about where the person wants to drink just the liquid of the knedel soup. Wants to drink just the liquid of the knedel soup. In other words, not our case that we spoke about where you're adding knedel in or whatever. You want to drink knedel juice. This, based on what we saw last week, is probably a machlekes the Rosh and the Rambam. And the Rambam basically tells us that over here, in this case over here, it's not a juice that normally people drink. And therefore, pashtis, even though you're drinking it, pashtis is a shahakal. The Rosh would probably say it's a mezainis because he's telling everything on if you cook it. And the Mishabura has a big arichas over here. Mishabura therefore tells you to go and pati yourself. Yikach ma'at me'alavives. He says, make sure you have some of the knedel, make a mezainis, and then go and make a bracha on something else in order to make a shahakal. And he gets involved in Dal Michya. That's a base.
Drinking the water that you cook knedlach in. That's what
he's talking, right? Exactly. He's not talking about chicken soup. He's talking about the liquid that you cook the knedel in. This is not such a common case. He's not talking about such a common case. Now, this is basically, Rabbi say, in a nutshell, the soups, all the powders, all those cubes and everything, those are all shahakal, because it's basically not the product itself, etc. That's just basically shahakal. And this is the basic idea. Now, I can see my timing over here. It seems I have 7 minutes to do Sif Aleph. Before I even try to attempt that, did Olam see Sif Aleph Bichlal or no?
Yes.
And have you heard Shirim on Sif Aleph or no?
You're talking about kidneys. Which part are you talking about?
I'm talking about making a bracha on what's the bracha on an onion, what's the bracha on a raw onion, what's the bracha on raw.
No, we did not do that.
So then we didn't do it anyways. And that's maybe next week or?
Yeah, we're going to do trima, which is a risuk, which follows this naturally, and then we were going to do one share on raw vegetables and raw fruits and all that sort of stuff. So,
so the raw vegetable soup is not now. Trima is next week. Reish Beis Siv Zayin is next week.
Yeah, I could talk to you about it off site, but how you think you can do Sif Aleph right now shortly? Or not, right?
No, definitely not. No.
Rabbi Kallus, I'm sorry. I'd just like you to repeat again how you made a chiluk between taking the vegetables out of the soup, and you didn't like that, but you said it was okay to do by the knedel. If I understood you correctly.
By the case of the knedel, you have, let's say, one knedel.
I'm not sure I understood the difference. Yes, can you repeat that?
If you have a knedel floating around in a soup, you have one knedel floating in a soup. Right. So then you have an entire thing of soup, and you have a knedel. That's clearly two foods, because it's not going to be eaten together in every single spoon. It's not going to be eaten in right of the spoons. So then there's clearly two different achilas taking place over here. Two different achilas. You can make two different brachas. Mashenkin, the case I was talking about before, and Mashenkin, let's say I'd have 10 knedlach, so then for Shteitzel you make only a mezainis and part of the soup. You have a bunch of soup nuts all over your soup. And the kimat in every bite, I'm going to be having soup nuts. And Avadi, you make just a mezainis. That's the regular rules. Of course, there's no question in the world. But let's say I have vegetables and I have, one carrot, and I'm going to eat this carrot, in 3 spoonfuls. I'll be finished with the carrot, and the rest is soup. And in a chanami, it could be that, then mitzad the shaila that we spoke about, you would have been able to separate it. I had a different shaila there, because there maybe the chicken soup pot is the carrot. Because maybe, like Rosh Hashanah said, the chicken soup is the ikr. That was the shayla we had. But if you have 10 vegetables all floating around in your chicken soup and whatever, and this, and in every bite you can have a vegetable and this, so l'chayra, the bracha has to be an adama in that case. L'chayra. because it's that's what's the mashmois in the Shabura. I don't know. It sounds like from Rav Shlomo Zalman, even that he's not so sure about. But that's the difference in the case of that in the Knedlach, when I said you can't now take out a carrot, make the bracha on the carrot and then the soup, because it's bets in one food. You have to decide. In the case of the Knedlach, it wasn't bets in one food. There's one Knedel floating around, and there's a Ganta soup over here. It's definitely two foods.
Did the Rav discuss tomato soup specifically with or without
the tomato
rice?
soup specifically, so we'll go slowly. If I take the tomato soup and I cook the tomato, and I'm left with the bits of tomato and the juice and whatever, regular adama, why not? If I cook it till the end, mamish, and there's no tomato left at all, that's mamish like the tila David. That the bracha over there, I don't have the tomato left. So over there, I guess the bracha would be, in that case, would be a shackle. What's the common way of how they make tomato soup? If the other would like to enlighten me, how do they make tomato soup?
So there's two ways to do it. You cook it, either it cooks all the way to the end, or there's another way to puree it first.
So if you puree it, you puree it and then cook it?
No,
You puree after it's cooked.
puree after it's cooked, yes.
Right. So if you puree after it's cooked, then that goes, and it's totally pureed. So that goes into the sugya that I spoke about, which I felt that would be a gather of a nikar v'tafel, and you'd make on it a shahako. Another, the only tomato soup that you'd make on an adama is if you have the actual tomato, bits of tomato, whatever, something like that. So then I don't see why in such a case you wouldn't make on it an adama if you have the actual tomato.
But it's not cooked that way, and it's a griusa. So why does it stay hadama?
Why? Tomatoes are cooked. Tomato soup is a very common thing. Why not?
But the raw tomatoes are eaten raw.
It's not totally in roiv. That's why I explained in the beginning of this year. It's totally in derech of roiv b'nei adam, not roiv of the min. This is a mistake that I saw a certain sefer makes. It's absolutely a toyas. When we say roiv over here, the lashon mishabura, and I'll read you. I'll quote lashon mishabura. It's actually in the other part over here, but I'll quote you the lashon in one moment.
Reish Beis, no?
Yeah, it's in the Be'er Lacha, really, in Reish Beis. This idea I saw also in the Pitzchei Halacha, that's in the Art Scroll book, in the 9th parak, in Ha'ara Samechei, he says, Kavana sheroiv b'nei adam yochlu kach, and he's mamish pashit, he's right. It's pashit like that. It means not that roiv of the tomatoes are used for that. We need not find out what roiv the tomatoes use. We need to know, do roiv b'nei adam consider this to be a normal usage? That for sure is true. If a person would bring in front, assuming he likes the taste, right? But the people that like the taste of tomatoes, they're not going to look at this and say like, well, what happened over here? What did he do? That's what the Mishabura means when we say roiv b'nei adam. And so Mamela, roiv b'nei adam agree that tomato, you should know, tomato juice, that's for sure going to be a shackle based on the shtia svara that we spoke about.
Okay, with rice? Rice?
What's the shot of rice?
Rice in the tomato soup.
So look, if there's tons of rice in the tomato soup, so it's not mitzad kol sheyesh bai, but I would imagine that if the taste is rice and it's just, a liquidy rice, then mitzad HILCHOS ikar v'tafel, it would probably be a mezainis. If that's not the case.
How does rice become an ikar in tomato soup? There'll be a lot of discernible rice. If the rice is cooked, generally,
if when you're eating it, you feel like you're eating rice, with a sauce. If that's the heritage, I don't know. I must admit, I haven't had a rice soup in,
well, generally, the rice. If the rice is put in at the same time as tomatoes, if the tomato cooks down, the rice cooks down. So the rice is not be'en, right? Am I wrong about that? Or it is be'en? Maybe you could put the rice in later. So, are you eating
spoonfuls of rice? When you eat it, it's spoonfuls of rice?
It's rice tomato soup or tomato soup.
But when you're
rice.
eating it, it's like you feel like you're chomping into rice and it's a liquidy.
Yes.
But there's bits and you see the rice and everything. You see the bits and everything.
So the rice has to be, in order to make it an ikar, this is all obviously subjective. In order to make it an ikar, there's got to be a lot of discernible. A lot of rice. You have to put it on a kaf. You have to put it on. It has to be floating on the spoon. How do you measure this? So
I admit this, Rabbi. I'm just going to tell you, if you want the psak halacha, I'll say the psak halacha. But the sugya is not here. The sugya is in Reshut Beis. That we learn ikar and tafel. We have to be kaveya.
In ikar and tafel. Okay, I got
Yeah,
it.
I mean, it's so, the vaila, it could be, it's a shtickle suffix. If you have a ton of rice, there's no shaila. And if you have a tiny bit of rice, there's also no shaila. It'll be the bracha of the soup. If the soup is a dama, if you have bits, it'll be a dama. If you don't have bits, it's shackle. So then everything will be shackle. The question will be, what happens when it's like a pure mixture? It's a pure mixture, and it's there's a liquidy feeling of the rice. So then Pasha's gonna have to go basa roiv. But if I just, could link to a svara that the Olam will see Mitzvah Hashem, which already is seeing from Shlomo Zalman that idea, if he's eating the rice in order to fill him up, and that's in essence what he's trying to do over here, so then probably the bracha will be mezainis. But again, it's not so much our sugya.
So what? Okay, and the knedel is the same, right?
No, because, but the knedel is much easier because the knedel has this verb kol sheyesh bo michamishes mini dagin.
Right.
So
right,
even if I don't have roiv, but I have in every spoon I have a knedel, I'm okay.
In progress.
I understood. Okay.
Right.
Any questions, Device? Any questions here on the floor? Any questions? Any questions on the Zoom? Okay, we thank the Rav profusely. Next week, we'll move on to Trima. And then, I don't know, we'll do raw vegetables and we'll discuss that exactly. We'll talk on the phone, we'll discuss that.
So next week is Reish Beis Ziv Zayin. My pleasure.
Yeah, okay. Everybody said tonight at 8.